All the scriptures in Matthew and Luke point towards a September 3 BC timeframe. I have seen proposals of using the Great Conjunction of Venus and Jupiter on June 17th, 2 BC as the birth date, and those advocates' reasoning is that 9 months before this was the first conjunction of Regulus and Jupiter. I know this looks really nice, but no. There are too many textual and historical barriers to try and place the birth in June of 2 BC. The biggest of which is that the census was conducted between August and October of 3 BC, and also that the Roman Senate bestowed Augustus with the new title on February 5th, 2 BC. The birth took place during the time that the census was being conducted, and its mandate to make Joseph and Mary go to Bethlehem was ultimately fulfilling Micah 5:2 in this. June 17, 2 BC is 4 months after all of that would have been completed, and it goes against what Matthew and Luke said. We have shown that from both ends that Luke places the birth in September of 3 BC, with Jesus' ministry starting in the spring of 28 AD. John the Baptist's birth pointed to it on the front end, with Tiberius's 15th year being shown to be the Tishri to Tishri span of 27-28 AD. And on the back end, Paul's chronology was established by starting with Gallius' proconsulship in 51 AD and seeing that the Jerusalem Council took place in 48 AD, is that this allowed us to rewind the clock back 17 years to 32 AD for Paul's conversion and seeing that the crucifixion most likely occurred in 30 AD. And from this established Lucan chronology is that the September 3 BC timeframe was confirmed further by Matthew as the dates perfectly align with Herod killing all the boys 2 and under. So we're very positive from Matthew and Luke that Jesus' birth was in September of 3 BC. But we want to know the exact date, and currently the best we could guess in that month is Jupiter's first conjunction with Regulus on September 14th, 3 BC. But there's nothing in Matthew or Luke to say, yep, that's it. So if we want to know the exact date, is that we have to go outside of Matthew and Luke and turn to the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was to be born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Did you catch it? No? That's fine. We'll break this down working backwards from verse 5. We know that the man-child who is to rule with a rod of iron is Jesus, because earlier in Revelation, Jesus said that he will give others the same privilege that he received, and in chapter 19, John described Jesus' second coming by applying Psalm 2 to him, that we know is connected with Numbers 24:17 and Genesis 49:10 because of the royal scepter and rod language that's in there for the Messianic King of the Jews. So, verse 5 is 100% referring to Jesus in the scene here. And at the beginning of the verse, it describes a woman bringing forth a man. This is a birth reference because in verse 2, it explicitly said that she was pregnant and about to give birth to the child. Now, look at the last part of verse 4 again. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was to be born. You can clearly hear the reference to Herod's massacre of the innocent in Matthew 2 here. And the other historical reference that occurs here is at the end of verse 5, saying that the child was caught up unto God to sit on his throne. This is clearly describing Jesus' ascension after his resurrection. So, John is clearly talking about Jesus' birth here. Now, how we can arrive at the exact birth date is by going back to verse 1 and recognizing that John is seeing celestial signage at work here because he continues in the verse describing the woman being clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. You will read in any star atlas, like Norton's, that there are 12 visible stars around Virgo's head. So, when John says he sees the sun, moon, and stars, that's exactly what he means with those outer space objects. And as such, he is referring to the only female constellation on the zodiac, the constellation Virgo, the Virgin. John is having a similar experience here as to that of Daniel's when he saw the ram and goat astronomical signage of the Persian and Greek empires going to war with one another. As Daniel is to the Old Testament, so is John to the New Testament. And we saw earlier that the wise men got fired up after seeing the star move from the Leo constellation and came to a stop in the Virgin constellation right over top of Bethlehem. What's interesting as well is the reference to the Great Red Dragon. Astronomically, there are a few possibilities here. There's Hydra, that is on the other side of the ecliptic from Virgo and Leo. There's actually a combination of Scorpio and Libra proposal out there because the ancient Greek astronomy had Libra scales as the claws to Scorpio. That's pretty easy to find online, but was that combination ever referred to as the dragon? That part I could not find anywhere. But if so, it takes the zodiacal signs then down to 11, which seems a little weird when you start getting into the whole calendar discussion part of it. And there's the constellation Draco, the dragon, that could be the one as well. We can't definitively say which one of those three was the one that John had in mind, but since there are multiple options like that, that only means that the astronomical interpretation in Revelation 12 for the Virgo constellation is what John was referring to. And it fits within the book as a whole, as Revelation 5:5 plays off of Genesis 49 and Numbers 24, and Jesus referring to himself as the bright morning star at the end of the book. Both Revelation 5:5 and 22:16 have a really good chance that their root of David phrases in them are tied to the Virgo constellation as well. Romans 15:12 has Paul citing Isaiah 11:10 with the root of Jesse. This connects us right back to the Messianic branch language in Isaiah 11 and all the other ones that were translated into Anatole in the Septuagint. Their connection to Virgo is very possible because she is depicted holding a palm branch in her right hand and grain in her left. The brightest star, Spica, means an ear of grain in Latin, and you can find Jewish traditions that connect the story of Ruth with the Virgo constellation. And remember that, Ruth was ultimately, an ancestor of King David, and then you go all the way down to Jesus. Now, taking a look at Spica's name in the Stellarium software is that you see that the double star is also referred to as Azamek in Arabic. Now, according to Bollinger, is that Al-Zamak means branch. So basically, you have Virgo holding a branch, in essence, in each hand. Seiss agrees with Bollinger that one of Spica's Arabic names means branch. Ultimately, all of the astronomical signage being discussed here is referring to real celestial events as was seen in Matthew 2. So, all we need to do is to look in September of 3 BC to see if the sun was clothing the Virgin and if the moon was at her feet in our astronomy software. Now, starting back in August, is that you can see that the sun is currently in Leo, and as we start going by days, is that it is going along the ecliptic, and right about on August 23rd is that we entered into the Virgo constellation. Now, we're looking for that mid-body form, which would be kind of like the clothing of the Virgo constellation. Now, this, from what I've read, takes place between 150 to 170 degrees along the ecliptic. And when you look up here, we're at 146, and that going forward by just 4 more days, is that we are now in that 150th degree window. And that this window is going to roughly last about 20 days. And you can see that it takes us right up until September 15th. September 16th just goes right over, so basically along that time. But as you can see, is that this is right at the same time as our first conjunction of Jupiter with Regulus in Leo. So this already shows us that we are tracking correctly on what John was describing in Revelation 12. Now, all we need to do is find the moon under her feet during this 20-day span, as it needs to be positioned, roughly in that last 7 degrees of the constellation before it goes into Libra down here. So let's click off of the sun and go back to August 26th. And, for the sake of thoroughness, I'm just going to scroll by hour here. And as you can see, is that we don't have the moon in our window right now. And that this actually the moon that is, won't appear until we come to September 4th. Now, we keep going by the hours that you can see the moon kind of roughly going with the ecliptic, same as the sun does. And there it is in Leo. But you can see it's starting to move further down Virgo now. Here we are at September 9th. And the moon's getting pretty close there. And right about there, we can see that the moon is now positioned under her feet. The moon is still in the Virgo constellation. And if we go 2 more hours, it still is in Virgo. But just at the change into September 12th, is that it's now entered into the Libra constellation. And so, if you didn't catch it, is that roughly at 6 p.m. at the change of the day according to the Jewish calendar, is that Jesus was born on 9/11, right at or after 6 p.m. Reminder, hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, and leave a comment. And don't forget to visit us at justgrouper.org. But in the meantime, stay salty.